I've been talking a lot about fighters lately, and I'm putting up quite a few videos from fighters and those who have been showing chutzpah and giving it back to Trump. And now I want to contrast but the difference between a fighter and a not-so-fighter. And when I'm talking about a not-so-fighter, and I'm talking about within the context of the Donald Trump Washington, D.C. takeover, sending federal troops there to crack down on his crime initiative bullshit. And what I particularly want to focus on is Muriel Bowser, D.C. mayor, who who particularly doesn't seem to want to take up that whole notion of bringing a knife to a knife fight. She seems to be more interested in bringing a pencil at this time. I'm going to contrast that with the Attorney General Brian SCHWALB, who definitely is bringing a gun to a knife fight. And I can show you how both of those things have played out, and to me what the results are. When you contrast the way the two are approaching the Trump fascist regime trying to take over various cities in the United States and exercise their power over us. My name is Scott Schneider. It's coming up next on Fed Up in Minnesota.
Presently sending a final update to the onboard computers for antenna management, and we have a go for auto sequence starts. And we have auto sequence starts. 4, 3, 2, 1.
In order for us to begin this contrast between fighters versus not-so-fighters, we got to go back to the seat of the crime and where everything started. And that, of course, is back on August 11th, when Daddy Trump, Mr. Fascist dictator, decided that he wanted to send federal troops into Washington, D.C. to make it look like he was in charge of everything and make it look like he could beat his chest and go ahead and exercise his authority over the District of Columbia. His excuse, of course, was to get rid of all criminals there and make it a crime-free city. Obviously, those of us who have working brains understand much better that is simply not the case, and that he's only there so that he can begin the process of starting to flex his muscles and his iron will over democratic strongholds in the United States. Why isn't he going into red states? Obviously, that we know the answer. So Donald Trump, press conference, August 11th. President Donald Trump said Monday he's taking over Washington's police department and activating 800 members of the National Guard in the hopes of reducing crime. Bullshit. Crime was being reduced. It was just fine. There was nothing in Washington, D.C. that was happening that was any different than what was happening before Dumbledore ended up back in the White House due to the stupidity of the American people. And there's absolutely no reason for him to be deploying National Guard to crack down on crime. The president, flanked by his attorney general, his defense secretary, and the FBI director, both all despicable morons, said he was declaring a public safety emergency and his administration would be removing homeless encampments. We're going to take our capital back, Trump declared, adding he would also be getting rid of the slums. So here's the other problem, too. Daddy Trump. Taking our capital back from whom? Who took it away? What? Somehow people living in Washington, D.C., just regular residents, just living out their normal lives as the political machine continues to rage on inside the city? That somehow needs to be taken back from what? We know Washington, D.C. has had crime issues for years. So why all of a sudden now does Daddy Trump want to go and stick his useless fucking stinky smelling prattling asshole into everybody's business? Especially when crime's going down. Duh. Well, obviously it's for him to make it look like he's the tough guy. Make him look like he's has power over Democrats. And Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser is a Democrat. And in this situation, that becomes an opportunity for Muriel Bowser to stand up against the forces of fascism that we are seeing trying to march across our cities and destroy our democratic republic. For Trump, the effort to take over public safety in Washington reflects an escalation of his aggressive approach to law enforcement. Yeah, right. After you released all the 1,500 Jan 6 insurrectionists who beat the shit out of 140 cops on January 6th and then called them hostages. That day was a beautiful day in American history. The District of Columbia's status as a congressionally established federal district gives him a unique opportunity to push his tough on crime agenda, though he's not proposed solutions to the root causes of homelessness or crime. And that's what I wondered about, too. This is exactly what I wonder. What's going to happen to the homeless? Has he arrested all the homeless now and thrown them into jails? Where are they going to end up? Where are they going to put them? You going to keep housing them in prison? In jail? They got to send them to prison? What the fuck does this asshole think he's doing? There's just no reason for this. This does not solve anything. Fast forward to Mayor Bowser's response to this. August 11th. Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser held a press conference Monday following President Trump's announcement that he's taking over Washington's police department and activating 800 members of the National Guard in the hopes of reducing crime and tackling homelessness in the city. In other words, tackling homelessness is just getting rid of everybody off the street and not really resolving the issue or the problem that these people are facing that cause them to be homeless, of which there are many, and it's not just drugs and alcohol. But Trump exaggerated or misstated many of the facts surrounding the public safety in D.C., where the crime rate has fallen in recent years. Trump's plan prompted the District of Columbia mayor to voice concerns about the potential use of the National Guard to patrol streets. While this action today is unsettling and unprecedented, I can't say that given some of the rhetoric of the past, we are totally surprised, Bowser said. Well, there's a good starting statement. My message to residents is this, Bowser added. We know that access to democracy is tenuous. That is why you have heard me and many Washingtonians before me advocate for full statehood. Now, I'll give her that point, that the statehood thing is definitely something that should be seriously considered on the table. Of course, the Republicans are not going to do that. They don't care what's in because they want Daddy Trump to have federal control. They want the fascist takeover of the city to reign supreme here. What else did Mayor Bowser do at the time that Trump rolled in the National Guard and decided that they wanted to start patrolling the streets of an American city? Absolutely nothing I could see other than some soft peddling rhetoric here. So we go on, and everybody's pissed off. We have people lining the street, clogging the streets, massive protest signs. I've shown you the videos. And the church bells ringing, and people do not want the National Guard in the streets of Washington, D.C. with some kind of excuse for it to be a crime crackdown. Nobody wants the National Guard or the military in American cities. It's unconstitutional. It doesn't belong there. It's none of Trump's business what policing should be done in any American city. It should be an expansion of police force and police funding, but he laughed at that off because he just wants to have his power structure in place. So, we go along here, and it's 3 weeks later. All this happens. The crackdown happens. We got soldiers milling around the train station and all the public the public mall in Washington, D.C., picking up trash and just dilly-dallying around with a thumb up their butt. Basically making us look like we're a third world, North Korea, some kind of North Korea dictatorship country. And finally, Muriel kind of pulls her head out of her butt and decides that she wants to, say something or contest something about Trump being there. So she comes out on September 3rd and finally issues an executive order. Washington, D.C. doesn't need a federal emergency, Mayor Muriel Bowser said Wednesday, 3 weeks after he comes in, adding her new executive order is meant to be a pathway out of the federal takeover that is set to end this month. The Democratic mayor clarified that her order this week, which requires the city to coordinate with federal law enforcement, is not an endorsement of the Trump administration's ongoing involvement in the city, but rather a framework for ending the president's federal emergency. Oh, okay. So now you're going to issue an executive order where basically you're going to talk a little bit, back a little bit to Daddy Trump. But what are you going to do? You're going to continue to cooperate as if that's going to solve the problem, as if that's going to make everything better. So now you've basically capitulated to Trump after 3 weeks of doing nothing. You've gone on and you have pretty much cleared the pathway. You are effectively allowing him to continue to put his sticky little fingers all over your city and to grow the roots of his power structure. The Democrat mayor clarified that her order this week, which requires this, let me tell you, without equivocation, that the mayor's order does not extend the Trump emergency, Bowser said at a press conference. In fact, it does the opposite. What it does is lay out a framework for how we will exit the emergency. The emergency ends on September 10th. The only way it can be extended legally is by the Congress. So now you have a setup here where Muriel Bowser is effectively saying, oh, well, we'll continue to allow your federal troops to be in Washington, D.C. Well, as long as you pull out or take, you're effectively go ahead and rescind your order. As long as you pull out of Washington and don't extend the emergency order after September 10th, we're fine with you having federal troops here and other federal presence spread throughout Washington, D.C. to continue what you're doing. That she thinks is the way to fight, and that's the way she thinks that is the way to take on the challenge of Donald Trump trying to overwhelm our city with his presence via the National Guard and via ICE raids that are destroying Hispanic communities. Her comments came as Republican senators on Wednesday praised Donald Trump's efforts to crack down on crime in the nation's capital. One senator suggested reforming or altogether undoing ICE's Home Rule Act, a law that balances local self-governance with federal oversight in the capital. If we can return to the home rule status, we can give that a try, but we must remember that this is authority that is ours, has been delegated unwisely, and in my view, we can reform that, then let's do it. And President Trump's action is an important first step in that direction, Republican Senator Mike Lee of Utah said. He continued, but to the extent that the experiment is not able to work out, then we've got to be ready to do what needs to be done and undo home rule. So basically, they're just sitting here going, okay, well, we'll let the emergency end in September 10th, possibly, if you do everything we say. But there's the possibility that we could just go ahead and just crack down further and continue to extend this. And just a reminder, the Home Rule Act of 1973 allows the president to take control of the city's police for 48 hours if he determines that special conditions of an emergency nature exist, which requires the department's use for federal purposes. The president can retain control of the department for a longer period if he notifies the chairs and ranking members of the congressional committee that handle legislative matters pertaining to D.C. Any request of control over the city's police department for over 30 days must be passed into law. Well, he took over the police for 48 hours. That's already happened. So now, we have Muriel Bowser in all of the stuff that she's doing to sit there and just basically sort of halfway hedge and halfway sort of bumble her way through and say, speak out against Trump, but then at the same time, not really fight back in any way, shape, or form. And so the Republicans and Donald Trump get their way. They crack down on crime, according to them, and they get their little victory there. And that makes it look, they think that they've got everybody over a barrel, and that they have the authority to go in and do this kind of thing. And the experiment they're trying, the little feelers they're putting out to try to see if they can go into an American city and extend their fascism in power is working. And guess what, Muriel Bowser? Because you decided you wanted to halfway milquetoast your response to Donald Trump, guess what the Congress is doing? Now, House would act to extend Trump's D.C. takeover. Don't be fooled by that headline. This is just September 4th, so it was the day after this last article from CNN that talks about, on September 3rd, which talks about Muriel Bowser's executive order. House leaders do not plan to hold a vote to extend President Donald Trump's temporary takeover of the D.C. police before it expires next week, according to three people credited anonymity to describe internal planning. Speaker Mike Johnson said as he left the House floor Thursday that D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser's announcement this week that she would coordinate with federal law enforcement on an indefinite basis going forward seemingly resolved some of the issues. Now, that sounds like that we have basically headed off a worse thing. But in reality, all it's doing is making Republicans think that they can stay there. It's doing absolutely nothing to let them know that unequivocally that not only the people that want them there, but they don't belong there. They need to get their asses back to the Capitol where they should be and keep their hands and fingers to themselves in the White House. The decision not to act on the police takeover guarantees Trump's 30-day emergency will expire September 10th. While Senate Democrats have vowed for weeks to block the bill in the Senate using their filibuster powers, House leaders might have called a vote anyway to force vulnerable Democrats to take a position on urban crime. Oh yeah, well that can be defeated pretty easily by showing that this is all just a big power grab. I mean, that's like low-hanging fruit right there. These people are so fixated on made-up crime or overblown crime that could be easily just thrown out the window, especially with Trump and everybody detesting what Trump is doing. Senate Republicans are expected to give an extension a vote either. A senator could try to clear it by unanimous consent, but such a request could be easily blocked on the floor. Bowser on Wednesday called for the end of the police takeover, which Trump invoked under a provision of the 52-year-old law granting limited local autonomy to the district government. She has also been critical of Trump's deployment of the National Guard troops, yet tepidly, and ICE agents within the Capitol, but has welcomed a surge of other federal law enforcement, such as FBI agents and U.S. Park Police. I want the message to be clear to Congress. We have a framework to request or use federal resources in our city. We don't need a presidential emergency. Well, that's really great, Muriel Bowser. That's terrific. But the damage has already been done because you've allowed him to essentially just lay the groundwork for them to be hanging around Washington, D.C. and come back whenever they want. And as proof of that, that was September 4th. Here is Time Magazine. And this is today, September 10th. And the headline reads, Trump's emergency declaration for Washington, D.C. expires today. Here's what happens next. President Donald Trump's 30-day takeover of the Washington, D.C. police force is set to expire Wednesday night, but the federal crackdown in the city isn't over yet. Trump declared a state of emergency over crime in the nation's capital 1 month ago, invoking a section of the District of Columbia Home Rule Act of 1973. Yeah, on a very limited basis, which he has totally overblown and totally overextended to take control over the local police force. The law, which gives D.C. residents a greater degree of self-governance but retains Congress's constitutional authority over the city only enabled Trump to federalize the D.C. police for up to 30 days. After that point, Congress would need to extend the White House's emergency control, and House Speaker Mike "Where's Waldo? Where's Depends Johnson?" says lawmakers don't currently have plans to do so. "No one's calling in Congress yet," Johnson said during a press conference on Tuesday, citing D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser's ongoing cooperation and what he characterized as her indefinite welcome mat for the National Guard. In order last week, Bowser called for the ongoing collaboration between local and federal law enforcement to the maximum extent allowable by law within the district. Yeah, you think Trump's just going to take that and just stay within the bounds of the law? You're giving him an inch and he's going to take the whole freaking mile. He's going to eat that whole pie up. You just going to take give one little crumb and he's going to grab the whole thing from you. The directive does not have an expiration date. So what have you done, Muriel Bowser? What have you done? Absolutely nothing. You allowed Donald Trump basically to think that he could take over other cities in the country while at the same time just mill around and about your city and continue to just slap his hand over the top of you. If you have an agreement, my understanding is an agreement between the White House and the local leadership that I'm not sure Congress necessarily has to do anything. Where's Waldo, Johnson said. So we'll see how that plays out. Under Trump's takeover, he directed that the Metropolitan Police Department might be put under Attorney General Pam Blondie's oversight. Blondie then set up to tap the head of the Drug Enforcement Administration's to be the DC's emergency police commissioner as if they need one. But the city pushed back on the move as illegal, and the Metropolitan Police Department Chief Pamela Smith has remained in charge. So there's at least one little good thing that they did there. The end of the 30-day window is set to fully end Trump's authority in relation to the department and Blondie's oversight. But it doesn't end the presence of federal troops in Washington, D.C., and Trump's sticking his middle finger and index finger into both Muriel Bowser's eyes. While Congress isn't taking action to extend the president's emergency declaration, however, the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, now here comes the crackdown. Here comes the next thing. Here comes the claim of fascist power due to Muriel Bowser's capitulation. The House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform was set to meet on Wednesday, that would be today, to discuss a series of bills that would increase federal control over D.C. Among the legislation being proposed is a bill that aims to codify parts of an executive order Trump issued earlier this year, including by establishing a D.C. Safe and Beautiful Commission coordinate across federal agencies in D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, and to develop joint priorities to enable the full enforcement of federal and local laws within the district, according to a press release from the Oversight Committee. So now here we go. All he needed was D.C. to go drop down and bend down to him. And here we are. He got his he got the third leg that he needed in standing to try to push through legislation to anchor control over parts of 3 different states surrounding Washington, D.C. All because of what? Because Muriel Bowser decided she wanted to halfway meet Donald Trump somewhere in the middle, throw a couple of harsh words out there that weren't even that confrontational, and then at the end of the whole thing, say that she that she's glad that he ended the 30-day emergency, but that allow him to remain present there. Other proposals include the lowering age of juveniles who can be prosecuted as adults from 16 to 14 and allowing the president to appoint the city's attorney general. This is the other thing that comes up next, because the attorney general is the other guy who's fighting. And Trump wants to remove him and replace him with a loyalist. Guess what? Yeah, that's exactly what Muriel Bowser has allowed him to do. You give him an inch, he takes a mile. You give him a crumb, he takes the whole pie. Despite Trump's control over the NPD ending, the Army has instructed the National Guard, which Trump deployed on the streets of the Capitol when he declared the state of emergency, to remain in D.C. through the end of November. Our mission is not complete, said Brigadier General Leland D. Blanchard, who oversees the Guard in D.C., in his social media post. I've made the decision to extend the encampment as we continue to ensure that everyone who walks through these city streets is safe. So the Brigadier General's in on it too. He's basically just sucking the whole Trump line down. The order only applies to the D.C. National Guard and does not apply to Guard members from other states who have also been deployed in the city. Their next moves will be determined by their state's governors or by Trump himself, in collusion with those state governors who may want to take those same people into Baltimore and Chicago due to the fact that Muriel Bowser has decided that she didn't want to put her foot down and get in Trump's face and tell him to go to hell. The D.C. sued the administration last week over the deployment of 2,000 federal troops in the city, describing their presence as a military occupation. All right, so that's the next thing I want to visit here. Here's the other side of the fight. Deploying the National Guard to engage in law enforcement is not only unnecessary and unwanted, but is also dangerous and harmful to the district and its residents, said D.C. Attorney General Brian SCHWALB. There you go. Does that sound like Muriel Bowser? I don't think so. This has to do with the Posse Comitatus Act. Whether he has some ability to be charged over some of Washington, D.C. or not, having federal troops be established there is a whole other issue. Before we get to Brian Schwab, we have to visit the notion of how unpopular these excursions into American cities by Donald Trump happen to be with not only the people in those cities, but also the American people. And this from The Hill, from September 7th. Most oppose Trump deploying National Guard to D.C., other cities. Poll. Most Americans oppose President Trump deploying the National Guard to Washington, D.C. and other cities, according to a new poll. In the CBS YouGov poll, 57% of respondents said they are against Donald Trump's decision to deploy the National Guard to the nation's capital, while 43% backed the decision. I can guess who the 43% are. Yeah, the dumb dipshits, MAGAs in this country. The same poll found 58% of respondents said they are against Donald Trump deploying the National Guard to other U.S. cities, while 42% backed such action. Politico. This is from August 20th, so this is even further back. It's about a week after 10 days after the deployment of the takeover. The vast majority of Washington residents oppose Donald Trump's efforts to federalize the city's police department and deploy the National Guard, according to a new poll released Wednesday. The survey from the Washington Post Char School found that 79% of residents either somewhat or strongly oppose the efforts, compared to just 70% who backed it. So it's not just 10,000 protesters marching the streets, and that's like, oh, the rest of the city wants it. No, it's pretty clear. On to Brian Schwab. All right, this from the AP on September 4th. Now, this was the second lawsuit of two of them. And I'll outline the first lawsuit here. The original one from August 15th. D.C. Attorney General SCHWALB sues to stop federal government takeover of Metropolitan Police Department. So the first lawsuit that he filed was on August 15th. So it was just roughly 4 days after the takeover. And this particular lawsuit was against the takeover of the police department. Now, I don't know where this is going to go, because they're already pulling out of the emergency, and I didn't see it resulted in any kind of stay. But Attorney General Brian SCHWALB today filed a lawsuit challenging the federal government's unlawful attempt to take over the District of Columbia's Metropolitan Police Department. And the lawsuit targets the president's August 11th executive order and U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi's August 14th order to Mayor Muriel Bowser, invoking a never-before-used provision of the Home Rule Act to claim they always got to do this. They got to pull some sticky thing out of some act somewhere that has never been used. They just kind of dream up whatever the hell they can do with it. or however they can jack it around, to claim the federal command of the district's local police force. These orders far exceed the president's limited authority to request services from MPD, yes, which can only be done on a temporary basis under emergency circumstances and solely for federal purposes. It was supposed to be for 48 hours. He used the police force for the full 30 days. The Office of the Attorney General's lawsuit seeks to defend the district authority under the Home Rule Act, block the administration's unlawful orders, protect the safety of D.C. residents, workers, businesses, and visitors, and affirm that MPD remains under district control. By declaring a hostile takeover of the MPD, the administration is abusing its limited temporary authority under the Home Rule Act, infringing on the district's right to self-governance, and putting the safety of D.C. residents and visitors at risk, said Attorney General SCHWALB. The administration's unlawful actions are an affront to the dignity and autonomy of the 700,000 Americans who call D.C. home. This is the gravest threat to home rule that the district has ever faced, and we are fighting to stop it. Does that sound like Muriel Bowser to you? Doesn't sound like to me. In 1973, Congress empowered district residents to govern themselves by enacting the Home Rule Act. In Section 740 of the Home Rule Act, Congress gave President limited temporary authority to request and receive the services of MPD under special emergency circumstances and solely for federal purposes. The president's authority expires within 30 days or when the emergency ends, whichever comes first, unless extended by Congress. The Home Rule Act keeps operational control of MPD under the mayor and chief of police, and it only permits the president to make requests of MPD through the mayor. That didn't happen. In the district's 52 years of home rule, no president has ever previously attempted to exercise this authority. Well, what seems to be the issue here with this particular lawsuit is that is the actual takeover. They never requested services. The White House never worked with Bowser. They never requested any services. Muriel Bowser never, or SCHWALB, or anybody for that matter, and the police department were ever told their services were needed. There was not any kind of emergency in which the services were requested or the services needed to ever be entertained at all. I mean, there's no reason for them. And Trump just went in there and took it over. And so, even though nothing's been done about this particular lawsuit and the emergency has ended or is ending today, September 10th, this may be very important for the future because if this rules in the DC's favor, then this may prevent Trump in the future from being able to enact such a hostile takeover and do this again whenever he feels like it, particularly when election time comes around. So now the second lawsuit. This is for the National Guard. National Guard deployment. DC lawsuit challenges Trump's National Guard deployment as forced military occupation. District of Columbia Tuesday challenged President Donald Trump's use of the National Guard. Now, since it's Thursday to September 4th. And this is the AP story on this particular lawsuit. Seeking federal court to intervene even as he plans to send troops to other cities in the name of driving down crime. Brian Schwab, the district's elected attorney general, said in a lawsuit that the deployment, which now involves more than 1,000 troops, is an illegal use of the military for domestic law enforcement. No American jurisdiction should be involuntarily subjected to military occupation, Schwab wrote. The White House said deploying the Guard to protect federal assets and assist law enforcement is within Trump's authority as president. Yeah, but not to crawl all over the streets and take over the civic parts of the city. This lawsuit is nothing more than another attempt at the detriment of D.C. residents and visitors to undermine the president's highly successful operations that stop violent crime in D.C. Spokesman Abigail Jackson said, "No, the lawsuit is to stop a fascist takeover of Washington and a power grab by a bunch of fascists, which you are part of, Abigail Jackson. Shamefully, I might add. Members of the D.C. National Guard have had their orders extended through December, according to the Guard official. While that does not necessarily mean all of those troops will serve that long, it is a strong indication their role will not wind down anytime soon." So contrast all of that with Muriel Bowser. I don't know why they're together in this picture. I know that she didn't accompany him to any of the lawsuits because she wasn't part of any of them. I don't know why she would if she's not the one fighting back. But look at how Muriel Bowser has decided to take sort of a milquetoast, middle-of-the-road approach, and how it's resulted in nothing but extending the problem in exchange for a capitulation to Donald Trump's fascist authority, to the point where Congress makes the excuse that, oh, well, we won't, we love Muriel Bowser cooperating with us. She has been a wonderful tool and asset for us. So we're not going to extend the emergency, but we're going to stay in Washington, D.C. We're going to keep federal troops there. We're going to hang around, potentially to the end of November. And what would make one think that they're not going to do it further than that? In all things, all this does, again, is allow Trump to entertain the notion that he can come into Washington, D.C. and hijack any part of the District of Columbia with the National Guard, federal troops, federalized troops, anything, for any reason, no matter what he thinks, because nobody's going to fight back. Thanks, Muriel Bowser. Now, Brian SCHWALB. His lawsuits may be the very things that could keep Trump from ever coming back into Washington, D.C. in this sort of fashion. And he is the one putting up the fight. He's the one who's barking back. He is the one who's telling Trump where to go, sticking his middle finger in Trump's face and saying, fuck you. You don't belong here. You can't do this. And you need to get out. And hope that his court ruling is successful in the same way, what matter it was in Los Angeles, that this will be the thing that will continue to be the thing that will keep the edge off of Trump going into other cities. Even as he continues now to entertain that notion. Thanks, Brian. You are a fighter. Muriel Bowser, not so much. So the crux of that particular of the National Guard, the National Guard lawsuit really does kind of hit home the entire thing. What Brian's doing to fight back against Trump, and the entire point of what he's doing and what we are fighting against and what he's fighting against. So here's this is from WMAU, American University Radio. So it's basically a public broadcasting station, I think, in it's probably Washington, D.C. WMAU did interview a lawyer, probably a lawyer that is a contributor, Alex Coma, and he explains the gist of this whole thing. A. Martinez is the reporter asking the questions to interviewer. So, Alex, what is the lawsuit alleging? So, Alex Coma, probably a lawyer, explains in this interview, D.C. Attorney General Brian SCHWALB is basically calling this unconstitutional, saying that this is an improper use of the military on home soil here in the U.S. He's drawing out this point that normally D.C., while it doesn't have control of its National Guard, it can request it only in cases of natural disaster or riot or some sort of emergency. And they haven't done that here. And instead you've got the National Guard troops who aren't trained in policing patrolling the streets here in D.C. But the White House pushed back. They released a statement basically saying that the president was well within his lawful authority to deploy the Guard here, and called SCHWALB's lawsuit an attempt to undermine the president's operation. Bullshit, blah, 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 blah. And this is Martinez, I'm going to be in D.C. next week, Alex, so I'm kind of interested to see what the city looks like. But remind us why National Guard troops were deployed to D.C. in the first place. Well, this is all part of Trump's emphasis on crime in the city. Basically, his claim, his crime is out of control. Bullshit. Here, even though the numbers, of course, show otherwise, that many violent crimes are actually at historic lows. And as I said before, he's the one who controls the Guard. D.C. is not a state, so there's no governor to control it. Yeah, well, we could have the D.C. mayor at least stand up for it properly. It's solely in the president's authority, so whether or not people here think it's needed, he's got the power to send them in, and he's done so along with guards from other states, about 2,300 of them, all part of this broader surge of federal law enforcement officers into the city, whether it's FBI, ICE, DEA, the whole alphabet soup. Many people here aren't really thrilled to see them. Many feel it's kind of unsettling to see uniformed troops on the metro. It's unsettled people, but that hasn't changed the fact that the Guard officials are saying they should probably be here until at least the end of November, if not longer. Martinez, well, okay, so their presence helped reduce crime. Well, Trump, of course, said the city's crime-free now, but we know that's not true. The D.C. Police Department has found that crime overall has decreased, but I'd still add that the troops themselves, they're not authorized to make arrests. They can merely notify police if they see a crime, or in some instances call 911. So it's kind of difficult to draw any, direct correlation here when a lot of times they're doing things like spreading mulch and cleaning up parks. But back to what Coleman says here about Trump having the power to send in these troops. He doesn't necessarily have the power to send in the troops if there's no request or reason for it, and that's what SCHWALB's lawsuit's all about. That is what needs to be fought, because it is an excuse that doesn't exist. It is a flimsy excuse based on Trump's fascist dictatorship wannabe desire to take over Washington, D.C. That's what it is. And patrol it whenever he thinks he can, or all the time if he thinks he can. And that's the point. The troops are being misused. And that's the whole point of Ryan SCHWALB standing up for Washington, D.C. My name is Scott Schneider. I am fed up in Minnesota.